Now I'm going to throw a plate. I've got a little bit larger amount of clay here. This is still only going to be about a salad plate or so. It's not going to be a big dinner platter. And there are a variety of shapes of plates that you can make. I'm going to do a fairly simple rounded edged plate here. I'm going to center the clay just like I normally would. In fact, I like to cone the clay, so I'm going to bring it all the way up, even though it's going to end up really low. I'm also going to get rid, I put it down a little funny, so I got a lot of extra clay here. So I'm just going to get rid of that stuff that I don't need. Obviously, I'm throwing on a bat. Anytime you throw a plate, you just want to throw on a bat. Maybe if you're doing a little teeny tiny like saucer or something would be okay. But with a big plate, it's just too much big flat surface to try to move. And so throwing on a bat allows you to be able to move the clay once it's thrown, once it's wet. I also recommend if you're going to start throwing plates, you're not going to just throw one. If you want to learn how to throw, particularly if you're trying to throw a fairly large plate, a dinner plate or a platter, you're going to start with maybe a set of 4 or 5 or 6 dessert plates or saucers. Move your way up to maybe a lunch plate, I don't know, a diet plate or something like that, and then move up to your larger amount of clay. So once you've centered your clay, you're going to bring it down low, and this is what I was doing while I was talking to you. You can center it just like this. Of course, I don't have enough hand to really get all of that clay, so I tend to switch to this blade hand thing. Some people just grab a sponge and work with it that way. The idea is this is basically the base of your plate, so your plate walls are going to end up about here. You can't really make it a lot wider than that without, you know, getting the clay down low. So, or getting more clay eventually. So with a plate, centering and drilling and opening out the floor are the 2 big steps. There's not a lot of drilling, there's not a lot of pulling the wall, because there's not a lot of wall to a plate. But that means you've got to really be careful when you are opening out the floor and centering, that things stay even. So I'm going to go ahead and drill my hole. Now I'm using both hands just to keep myself steady. My arms are braced against my body. That was about it. That's about as deep as I'm drilling my hole. Now I'm going to start to open this floor out. And as you open out this floor, you notice that this ridge starts to want to happen. So if you can open a while and then compress, or you can kind of form those into one step where your hand pushes that edge down as you open up. Take your time opening up this piece. Come back to the middle and do it again. You also want to compress this floor quite a bit as you open it out. And compress that rim. Just like with anything, if you get a rough stuff here, if you don't compress that rim, you're going to end up with rips in the rim of your plate, and you don't want that. Now I tend to start with my fingers, or sometimes I'll grab a sponge and I'll actually open up with a sponge there so I don't have to keep coming back for water. And then I'll switch to a rib. And I always use a rib when I'm doing plates because it's so important to compress that floor, and the rib gives me extra support in compressing that floor. So now that I've got it basically thinned out, evened out more or less, I'm going to grab my rib. And there are special plate ribs that you can use if you're doing a big guy. This one's fairly small, so this metal rib is just fine. And I start oftentimes with the curved edge. That way if I have any unevenness, I don't get caught on the edges of this. But eventually the goal is to have a flat bottom. So you can see that when I press this rib into here, it's making my flat bottom. You can also use a wooden rib, and some people like to use a rib that's got a corner here that's kind of interesting. I'm making a fairly simple, slightly curved rim, and so I'm happy with the edge that I have there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this rim up. Now I've let it get a little rough there, so I want to compress that. I can really grab some clay on the outside and get a little bit more height here, and you can see that this particular type of plate that I tend to do, this is more of a plate that's going to hold something wet in it. My daughter jokes that my husband's only allowed to have pasta in this kind of plate because it won't slide off the side. If you don't like that kind of curve that I've created there, you can use ribs, fingers, other tools, to make more of an angle there. So I'm going to get back in there and redefine that edge. I'm going to get underneath with my other finger here, and then I'm actually going to bend this out. And you can see that's a different sort of plate that's still got a pretty significant rim on there. Very much a part of the design of the plate. Now, some people like to have a rim like this for basically the frame. If you think of the plate or the platter as a painting surface, you've got this space inside you can play with, and then this can be something different. It's the edge of your food or the edge of your glazed decoration. And then I'm going to get in here. Just like when you're using a chamois or a sponge, hopefully a chamois, to clean up your edge on a rim, you're not going to push right on the edge. You're actually going to fold that chamois over, and you're going to support that chamois underneath, push on the top and bottom in this case, and let it kind of drag along that edge there. And I've apparently got crud all over my hands, so I got to clean that up there. Now, do not forget, you know, if you don't get around to undercutting because your edge is too low here, that we can live with, but do not forget to use the wire to cut underneath this piece. If you leave this plate on the bat, which you will, without undercutting it, which you shouldn't, then what's going to happen is that clay, as it shrinks from wet to leather hard, when you're ready to trim it, what's going to happen is those particles shrink. They're not going to be able to move this way, and so they're going to move away from each other, causing a weak spot down the middle. That crack generally doesn't show up until you're bisquing it, when it's in the kiln, or when it's in the drying stage from after you've trimmed it. So I always have people say to me, I didn't undercut it, it's fine. And they're right, it looks fine when it's off of the, you know, when they're trimming it, but it's not going to be fine later on. You're going to have those cracks show up later on. So take care of that now. So this piece here, I'm going to take the whole bat off of the wheel. Having some issues with sticky bats. I'm going to take this whole bat off of the wheel. This little bit that I dropped in at the end, I'm probably better off just picking that off when it's a little bit drier. I'm going to let this set up until the rim is leather hard, and then I'm going to flip these two guys together. I'm going to put a board on top of it, and I'm going to flip them as a set and let the floor dry for a little bit, and I'll show that in another video.